part recorded? We will come back from recess. So tonight it's a big tent. We have a lot of moving pieces. So I want to give kind of an overview of how the next little bit is going to go according to our agenda. So coming up next on our agenda is our linkage session with the public and the taxpayers. We plan for this to go from approximately 6 o'clock to 6:45. And this is an invitation to come down to the table and have a discussion with us about the district's educational programs and operations. And so if you have a large group of people who are speaking on one subject, you might want to consolidate that or send a representative. We want to make sure that we have enough seats for everybody around the table, but we want all voices to be heard. And then we'll take a brief recess after our linkage session, and when we return from that, we'll do official public input. And that's the 3 minutes at the podium consecutively, where you can enter or read in your statement. But this is a great opportunity here in the linkage session. If you have comments or would like to have a discussion, it's rare to be able to actually come down and have a discussion with the board, whereas public input really is more one-way, directional. So at this time, if you'd like to come forward and take a seat, and we can, depending on how everyone feels, we can take a moment to introduce everyone really quickly. If you'd like to introduce yourself and kind of your connection with the district or Mercer Island, that would be great. And then, again, I'll try to give you a 5-minute warning. At 6:45, there you go. At 6:45, I'll give everyone kind of a 5-minute warning that we're ready to wrap up the linkage session. So, all right. Anyone else is welcome to come down. And let's go ahead and get started. Director D'Souza, would you like to introduce yourself?
I'm David D'Souza. I've been on the board 4 years now and running again. I've got 3 kids in schools, 2 in the district, both in high school, and 1 recent graduate who I'm taking to college next week.
Hi, I'm Ralph Jorgensen. I've been on the board for about 4.5 years. Let's see, I'm stepping off in November. Let's see, 2 daughters, one who's in higher ed is a junior, and one is at the high school.
Hi, Tracy Drinkwater, and I'm finishing up my 4th year, stepping off at the end of November. And I have 3 daughters, but only one is still connected to the district. So.
Hi, I'm Deborah Lurie. I am been on the board for about 2 years, and I have 1 daughter in the district.
Donna Kolaski, superintendent, entering my 3rd year as superintendent on Mercer Island and my 34th year in public education. And just because we're talking about kids, I cannot neglect my 28 and 30-year-old children who have not given their parents any grandchildren yet.
And then I'll grab that one. I'm Brian Giannini Upton, currently president of the board. I'm entering my 2nd year on the board. I also serve for the Washington State School Directors Association as a legislative committee member representing Director Area 2, which encompasses about 20 school districts within the King County region.
I'm Heather Gauchi, and my daughter Harper over there is starting 1st grade at Northwood in the fall, and then we also have a 3-year-old too. And our daughter has taken a bunch of classes at Youth Theater Northwest, which is why I'm here, and loves it, so that's why I'm here.
I'm Stephanie Bull. I am the business manager at Youth Theater Northwest. I have no children in the district, but if you count all the students, I have a lot of students in the district.
Dan Glass. I have 3 children, all of whom went through the district, one of whom is a public school teacher in inner city New York City, and I'm also the son of a public school teacher from Boston. I am a former school board member, so I've sat in your seat. It's very exciting to be back here. And I'm a supporter of UC Northwest. I'm glad to hear you guys are all here tonight. And I'm actually just going to take 1 second because I have another commitment I'm supposed to be at. And just thank you so much for everything you did and listening to the input I provided in terms of the communication with the citizens, the research I did with WASDA, and the support keeping the transparency and the open lines between citizens and school board members open. It really means a lot. And I want to say thank you very personally to the board members who met with me one-on-one to discuss the issue. I really appreciate that, and that means a ton to me. So thank you. That's really all I needed to say tonight.
I'm Mike Westover. I have a 3rd grader in the district and a 2-year-old.
Okay, so we don't have a set agenda of topics to discuss. So a lot of folks here from Youth Theater Northwest, and if you have a specific person who would like to kick things off or discussion, I'd be happy to hear that.
Sure, that can be me. I was going to leave this for public comment, but I can do this now, right? Is that awesome? We'll just do it now. I prepared a little speech for you guys. My name is Stephanie Bull, as we've covered. I'm the registrar and business manager at Youth Theater Northwest, and I'm here to talk with you guys about the buses no longer going to after-school classes. MISD has been busing students to YTN for over 20 years, and it's vital to many of our students. In fact, 55% of our students ride the bus to our after-school classes, and that's about 3 to 5 students on 4 different school buses, and that's Monday through Thursday. So that's 3 to 5 students on each bus is a drop in the bucket, but it's 55% for us. And these students don't have any other way to get to class, and these students need theater in their lives. Many organizations who have also been in our boat have been able to find alternative services to get their students to after-school classes, but as a nonprofit arts organization, we don't have the means and we don't have the staff to do it. The Boys and Girls Club has been approved to have MISD buses take students to them after school, and we're a mere block and a half away from them. And all bus routes end up passing Youth Theater Northwest to get to Boys and Girls Club. So with all the information that I have just said, on behalf of Youth Theater Northwest and all of our students, I would please beg you to reconsider to make arts enrichment accessible for all students on Mercer Island. And thank you.
I'd love to add to that. Our daughter Harper always takes the bus from Northwood to Youth Theater Northwest, and without that service, she can't. We both work, so she wouldn't be able to go. And as someone who grew up in the theater, my husband and I both did, I know how theater is so huge for anyone, really, but it made an enormous impact on my life, and I can see it making an enormous impact on her life, and so many kids, and everyone should have that opportunity. It would just break my heart to not be able to have these kids go there anymore, and to see, I know that with not working in a nonprofit, your resources are so limited, and we all need to rally around them and help out here. I can't say enough amazing things about what they do for the kids in our community and for families in our community. So I would also please reconsider that the busing situation. And thank you so much for opening this up to having community come and share our thoughts. Thank you very much.
Sports and on academics, and it's so wonderful to have this on the island. So I just back what they're saying.
Yeah, same here.
So we've received quite a few emails in the last 24, 48 hours concerning this, and predominantly I've responded on behalf of the board, which is my job as the president, to be the spokesperson of the board, but very narrowly prescribed as to what I can or can't say. So of course I've deferred to the superintendent, who really has the discretion and authority over operations. And so I'm not sure if the board would like to weigh in where we can. Here's a situation where we can be a little bit freer because we are in a regular meeting, or if we'd like to defer to the superintendent.
I think I'd like to hear from the superintendent first before weighing in any opinions or suggestions.
I would agree, but I'd also like to say for anybody who's walked in late, feel free to come up to this chair, or anybody who's out there who has a question or wants to make a statement, there's some empty chairs here as well.
So just some key points in working with staff on the decision that was made last spring about the changes in transportation to smaller non-district sponsored clubs and activities. There were certainly several that were impacted, and there was a communication to the parent community dated June 7th specifying that transportation services would be discontinued for the 1920 school year. This followed many months of communication signaling that this change was imminent. And there were several underlying concerns that drove the decision. There was not just one specific thing. Primary is our ability to secure drivers with the sufficiency to maintain the home-to-school needs, which is our primary role of transportation in our routes across the school boundaries. Obtaining drivers has been a significant challenge for almost all districts, not just us, across the state and frankly across the country. I've been dealing with not being able to find bus drivers for many years. The nature of the job, the scheduling of it, it's generally a split shift, part-time, finding people who can meet the qualifications and sustain the qualifications. It's one of the strictest requirements, job requirements in having bus drivers. Also, our existing programs and athletic activities place a significant demand on our transportation department. Some evidence of this is the high school, unfortunately, but necessarily, has to rely on charter buses to provide transportation for many of their club and team activities because it's so much broader than what our transportation department is able to provide. That reliance on charter buses alone costs the districts tens of thousands of dollars every year. There's also a related concern for student supervision. In order to transport students from multiple buildings to other non-resident locations, students frequently have to wait at their schools until the bus makes the trip from other buildings. So students in the district, of course, require proper supervision, especially when they're on our campus waiting. So this creates the need for a string of 15 to 20-minute assignments that are also difficult to fill and cost the district additional supervision wages. Another major concern that we had to look at is the issue of the scale and available seats on our bus routes. One of the funding metrics that drives our state funding is the efficiency of the transportation program. Examples being the number of students on the bus, the miles per trip, the total trip time, among other factors. The nature of many of the programs that have been excluded from transportation for this upcoming year were very variable in nature. Students were not attending sessions on a daily schedule. It created quite a logistic quagmire for our transportation department trying to accommodate numerous individual student transportation requests and potential student safety issues as their locations and schedules would often change, and there was a lack of communication to our transportation department. And we had many staff hours that were spent trying to track down children that didn't get on the bus to attend a program, and it was time that was not spent on our regular bus routes or coordinating other school-sponsored travel. So the variable day schedules of all of these external programs really created difficulty in establishing appropriate size bus routes to meet the available fleet of vehicles and maintain appropriate route lengths. Based on the high variability and difficulty of piecing together the routes, the only really viable option, as the district projected future needs would be to establish 2 activity routes to meet the external program enrollments. This would require the purchase of at least 2 buses and 2 more drivers. So the purchase of buses is about, I'm looking at Ty to make sure I get the numbers right, about $250,000. And 2 new drivers annually, about $80,000. The routes would most likely consist of only afternoon trips, which again would be very difficult to fill those kind of positions. Yes, the Boys and Girls Club and the JCC, the Jewish Community Center, did retain transportation support for a couple of reasons. Scope and size being one of them. Both programs provide comprehensive before and after care programs and generate reliable daily routes. Our on-site elementary after-school care at each of our campuses does not meet the needs of all our families that require before and after-school care. And so the Boys and Girls Club and the JCC both fill that before and after care gap that we're not able to fill. Additionally, both programs have significantly more enrollment than any of the other programs. The Boys and Girls Club averaging a daily ride count of about 112 students, and the JCC around about 90. Youth Theatre Northwest had a peak transportation request in fall of 2018 of about 53 students, with, again, various days and schedules that were really difficult for our transportation and our site administration to know where students would be and at what time. So those were many of the factors that were included. We did, again, send communication to parents last spring to let them know that this was going to be discontinued, with the hope that there would be other plans made, ways to carpool or look at other organizing carpools or other ways for the organizations to sustain transportation for students. But as a district, it just had become really problematic for us, both certainly budget-wise as well as logistically, with just numbers of students. My intent, because I also received all the emails that the board received as well, and thank you, Brian, for responding and referring them to me, is to send a description of all of this in a letter format. I was thinking to the Youth Theatre Northwest board, but since you're here, you can probably direct me as to who would be the best entity to send it to. I know that some of the emails came from boards, some
That
came
would be
from
me.
parents, but we can certainly send the explanation as well. But parents should have had something in the spring, so hopefully they were working on ways to meet the great services that you guys provide.
Yes. I think here's hoping that that does work out. But I also, we won't know how this affects us until later. I know martial arts is also one of the other ones, and they've been able to get a van and a driver, and that's amazing. But honestly, we won't know how it affects Youth Theatre Northwest until next fall, because then we'll get a full year of what happens. But I did want to come here and make our voices heard, because I think that that's very important, and honestly, we will probably continue to make our voices heard. So, but I think all the reasons that you have given are. You guys have thought through this, and I've talked with Dave multiple times, and you were correct. For the past year, he was like, I don't know about whether or not we're going to be able to, and it's. I do hope that at some point there is more of a connection with the school district and Youth Theatre Northwest again, and if that's not this year, hopefully it will be in the future. So.
I just want to thank you all for coming here, and all the people that sent letters and have this concern or contacted us in any way. And I think there's absolutely no doubt that we value YTN and that we think it's a wonderful organization. There's no disagreement with any of the fabulous things that people said about how much they love YTN and what wonderful things it does for their children, my own included, when they were younger. But as you can see, we're constrained too. So
Yeah.
unfortunately, it was helpful to hear all the details of that because I had some guesses in my mind what it was, but that was much more comprehensive. Yeah, we do want to support. I think it's just that in this case, right now, it's very challenging for the district.
Other comments or responses?
I don't want to repeat too much of what Tracy said, but we do. I mean, we've worked really hard this past year on our values, vision, and mission, and it starts out with we support the whole child. There's people on this board who have extraordinary passion for the arts, and I think everyone has extraordinary passion for the arts, and also understanding the conflict of two working parents and getting kids to after-school activities and having to hire a nanny versus taking the bus, and it's not easy. I mean, thank goodness mine's more independent now because I don't have to do it anymore, but trust me, I dealt with it every year until that was, we got older. So one of the things that is often said to us by our superintendent and business manager is we can do anything, we can't do everything, and it's making difficult choices. And as we went from 3 to 4 elementary schools and neighborhood schools, it changed the bus routes, and there's pros to that because we've got neighborhood schools and they're great and a brand new amazing elementary school, but it's cut back on some other things, unfortunately. So thank you so much for your passion and your commitment to the kids.
Of course. Hi, I'm Stephanie Boyer. I'm the director of Pebble Preschool and a new after-school program that started. We're starting our second year at the Mercer Island Presbyterian Church. And I find myself in a similar boat, although our program is small. We're starting with 16 students enrolled for various days. This year, we started with 11 last year, so it continues to kind of grow. One of our biggest aspects to that is transportation. And I've talked to Dave and sent emails and Fred, and this last year, we do have access to some vans that we've been able to use. And so I also, in college, was a bus driver. And so I am like pro public school transportation. I get it. And I guess I just also am curious if there's not some other creative solutions. Like I've suggested, if we could we're on the north end, so if some of our students can also get to the peak with where I can then, and so kind of just those pieces of what that looks like. So I wonder if it's not as much of a black and white yes or no of getting them, but if partnership as a community and as a village. A lot of our families have tried some of the Kids Co. and different services at the school, and that's just not meeting their needs. And so I just wonder, obviously not to be settled probably tonight, but would just like to suggest that maybe there's some further conversation with some of our programs together, kind of working with the school district, not in conflict. And some of that, because I'm often driving one of the vans picking up, and so talking to a lot of our either teachers or paraprofessionals who are curbside and waiting with 6 kids for the van to show up, because we're also in that carpool huddle that's kind of a disaster of the kiss and go line. So also, I just wonder what kind of creative solutions that there could be in partnership.
I appreciate everybody's input, and also appreciate the great responsibility and accountability that our public transportation school bus drivers have, and supervising and the liability and accountability for all of that. Just a question, though, and this would not be relevant for the younger age set, I would think, but for a middle school student who was participating in youth theater, who was able to walk 3 or 4 blocks, is that an option, or can they only take the bus to Peak if their destination is truly Peak?
We don't have our Director of Transportation here, so I'm looking at Ty, but he's looking back at me. I don't know if we have the exact right answer to that, and I would hate to give the wrong information.
I don't have the exact right information for that either, but we do try to structure the routes to be the most efficient possible, and by shifting drops to different locations, it can create problems. At this point, the routes have been built. The drivers are bidding on the routes this next week, and changes would be incredibly difficult at this point. But it's we can have a conversation. I can talk with Dave, and we can see.
Is that an option? I'm just wondering if that's a current option or not an option at all. So, yeah.
Yeah, I super appreciate what transport used to do. When my kids were in elementary school, we did take advantage of it too. I know my kids had to get to the community center from Lakeridge, and it's super useful to have that bus. And so I deeply sympathize that it's been around a long time, and it's now going away and changing its nature for sure. And island transportation clearly at all levels, even for adults getting to work and getting to light rail eventually and to the bus stop today, is also a problem. And we're seeing that in many, many ways. So I hope this is something, as an island, we can also figure out a better way around it. Now, I do also notice that with kids, a whole new set of problems arises, and you do want accountable professional drivers who've been, background checked, understand what it's like to take care of kids, understand and put the safety of kids in their bus and when they drop them off at their destinations kind of front and center. So the bus drivers are taking on a great deal of responsibility here. And we did go through a bargaining effort to actually reward them for that. As well, a whole new effort around training for bullying and harassment issues and how to take care of problems at each stop. So, that's why we like our bus drivers, and that's why we'd love to see something happen here. So I'm with you in trying to make this happen, and it sounds like there'll be some discussions, but it does also look like this is a heavy hill to get up, for sure. So it's hard to see necessarily light at the end of this tunnel this year, but I think it's something that the board also can think about over the long term, and how do we also work with the city and think about this from that aspect as well.
Dr. Lean, I saw that you joined us at the table. Are you speaking with Youth Theater Northwest? Is it
No,
okay.
I have a separate issue, so
All
I
right.
don't want to interrupt the
Yeah,
flow of
I
this
just
conversation.
want to make sure that you know that I saw you. Yeah, and I want to make sure that we provide you an opportunity and a microphone to introduce yourself and your subject. I want to thank you for reaching out to the board and expressing your comments and your suggestions. And it is important that we hear about this and that we hear from our community of these concerns. And we do, of course, acknowledge that the superintendent is our lead learner and has the authority and the direction over operations. And that incorporates a huge team of subject matter experts that help to build these systems. And so, without saying too much, I think the board hopes that we'll move forward in an equitable manner that serves all students and the whole child, and that we have the best outcomes for every student within our school district that's served. And so we don't know at this point what that's going to look like, but keep letting us know how it's going, keep communicating with us, and sharing your thoughts, okay? Yeah. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hello, long time no see. So I also prepared a statement. So what I'm going to do is, if that's okay with all of you, I'll read the statement that I prepared last night at midnight. So hopefully it's coherent, and maybe expound on some points, and hopefully provide a little bit of insight and feedback. I'm sure every single person here at this table now knows that we're going to be talking about dyslexia. So here's my prepared statement. Dear members of the school board, Superintendent Kolaski, and members of the administration, thank you for the opportunity to address you today. About 5 years ago, my son was diagnosed with profound dyslexia. Because of my training as a neuroscientist, I was able to quickly immerse myself in learning about teaching methods that can support both the general education classroom as well as the 1 in 5 students with this language-based disability. Due to the accident of birth, my son was born to parents who had the training, ability, and financial means to remediate his dyslexia with the appropriate teaching methods. But we had to do so without the support of the district for many reasons, and many of you know about these reasons because I've had multiple discussions with various members of the school board. But many other families have also had to do the same within our district. I wanted to applaud the efforts and changes I've witnessed over the past 5 years. Fred and I have had multiple conversations about a lot of the changes that they were happening incrementally as we were aging, but I was seeing it benefit the younger children in our district, and so I didn't write this part down, but from the bottom of my heart, I was moved to tears at a couple of our school board meetings when I was seeing the changes that were happening. And so I wanted to thank you for all of this. I think that this is something that, coming back and, showing gratitude is really important. But that said, there are a couple of items that do still leave me concerned. I reviewed your deck, and thank you for providing that ahead of time. Many, if not most, children with dyslexia, as you mentioned in the deck, are above average in their intelligence. It's an established fact that a large proportion of CEOs, entrepreneurs, and innovators have dyslexia, and that includes the likes of Richard Branson, Thomas Edison, Charles Schwab. The list goes on. And there's a great book called The Dyslexic Advantage that actually talks about how the brain is wired differently that allows for this global, strategic view of the world. And the deficit that's caused by this change in wiring is the loss of this language loop in the brain. So a large proportion of these children are twice exceptional. And that means they're gifted and they have a learning disability, which you all know. But our highly capable program doesn't reflect the proportion of students with dyslexia that should qualify. As you discussed, or as you'll discuss, scientifically valid, evidence-based teaching methods, please consider that the project-based teaching methods in our highly capable program is in fact a desirable teaching method for these students. I think it's imperative to investigate why these students are underrepresented in this environment and remediate this lack of representation. I could go on for hours about this subject, as you know, but I implore you to consider that while I've advocated tirelessly for my child's rights, many simply cannot do the same for their children. As we view this in a broader context of equity, please consider that many families do not have access to outside resources and may not recognize that their bright but struggling child is simply not being taught in a method that works for that particular child. In particular, I want you to consider how the district can remove barriers of access for these children and to take a leadership role in identifying and providing an environment in which all of our children can reach their fullest potential. So that's what I prepared. I wanted to expound on that last point, though, because we're out of the woods now. My son is thriving. And, he's a perfect example of intervening at the right time and early, very early, makes a difference. And the more I learn about this, the more I see how important it is to get those interventions into place before behavior problems occur, confidence problems occur, children lose interest in school, but they're bright. And there are so many families where you'll hear them say, my kid's so bright, but I don't know what's wrong with him, you know. And this is the problem, and this is what we see especially with these twice exceptional kids, is they're really bright and they're struggling, and they're compensating in ways that teachers don't see. And so because they're so bright, they're able to compensate until they hit a wall. And then, you know, that ship has sailed. It's too late because they haven't been identified. And so if we're able to identify them early and we can really teach them in these methods, these, you know, large project-based methods that are so important for these children with dyslexia, that can really impact a lot of lives. And a lot of parents simply, they don't have the background or the understanding. Imagine even if they knew what was going on with their child, but they were holding it down 2 jobs, single parent. You know, you could go on, and they simply are trying to make ends meet. They don't have the bandwidth to make sure their child and advocate for their child in a way that they want to. And it breaks their hearts. It absolutely does. So this is really, truly an equity issue. And I feel very passionately about that. And so I would really like to see that addressed as well, that we have parents, you probably know every parent. I know you actually had a meeting with them because I was called afterwards. And because I'm linked into this community. And, you know, so you have these very active parents who can advocate, and they have the time and they have the resources, but many parents can't. And so what do they do? And do their children just kind of squeak along, thinking that maybe they're not as smart as, you know, they'd like to be, or they think they are, or, you know, they're struggling in ways that are unexpected, because that's what happens. So it would be important for me to see some of these changes where the parents don't have to go to the mat every single time to get what they need for their kids. And I think that that has been changing over the last 5 years, and I appreciate those changes greatly. But I would like to see that needle continue to move. So that's what I have to say.
I just want to point out, we have about 7 to 10 minutes left in the linkage session, so yeah.
Me too.
I know. I'm preaching to the choir.
Other comments, reactions, thoughts?
I appreciate you coming back and appreciating what has happened, and then now advocating for other families. I think that's really lovely, because there's oftentimes people come and complain, and then we never hear from them again whether things improved or not. But really appreciate you taking the time today to come in, and yeah, I think in many ways, I can't speak for everyone, but you are preaching to some choir members here. So really appreciate what you said.
Thank you, Tracy.
Yeah, thank you. It is frustrating that so many parents have to kind of come through and advocate to get the needs of their children met. And I appreciate that frustration. I'm glad that this legislation has passed, and we'll be doing things based on it. I think really the lighthouse, state around this is Massachusetts, which has had dysgraphia, dyscalculia legislation for a number of years, as well as a number of institutes that are doing research into better ways of teaching kids around this. And I hope we'll be able to borrow some work from them as time goes on. So I did talk to a student who is also doing her Girl Scout Gold project on this. And so she's trying to build a kind of workbook for students and parents, so that to help them with these type of issues and advocating as well. So she was supposed to be here, but apparently
maybe she'll come
later.
But an important point is that those teaching methods are actually very well established now. The focus doesn't need to be on research. What we need to do is roll out
Just
what
use
we
them.
know. Yeah,
So maybe I'll get the student in contact with you too. I'll ask her first, but
Sure.
that might be a good thing too. But you might know her already, so.
I just might.
But thank you very much for coming and
Thank
telling us about this. I love the passion and as well as the insight. It's great for all of us to get to.
I also am really glad to hear how well your son's doing now.
Thank you. So am I.
Thank you for coming, and I hope that you'll continue to give us your expertise in this area. And I know how well he's doing. I see it. He's a great kid, and I'm so happy that you guys were able to come back. Or he was able to come back to the district, getting the tools that he needed. I went through testing with my kiddo at about the same time, and different issues, but the response from a 6-year-old to me at the time she was tested was, "Am I smart like my friends?" And it was heartbreaking. And, to be able to tell her yes, was thank goodness, because if I had to say no, I don't know what I would have done. But, kids, we don't want kids to feel that way, and we want to know then. So thank you. And there's no question in my mind that strong advocacy from you and other parents like you has led us to where we are, knowing that it's such a priority. So thank you.
Thank you, Deborah.
Just echo everything everybody said here. Just thank you for your advocacy and your expertise, and I'm glad things are going well. But it's exceptional that you're advocating for other people too.
Hi.
Hi.
How are you? Yeah, thank you for being here and presenting. You do have a body of knowledge that you arrive into a room with, and so I appreciate you bringing your voice forward and advocating for other families. And I'm very excited to point out that in our consent agenda later tonight, the board has taken the last year plus to pull apart our overarching mission, vision, and values for the district. And the new district that is set to be adopted in our consent agenda tonight, the new mission or values state specifically now, students are the priority, and we believe in supporting the whole child, first and foremost. Next to that is creating inclusive and equitable learning settings, ensuring our school communities are safe and supportive, and providing rigorous and challenging learning. So the entire district has just made a pivot, and I think it's specifically looking to subjects like this, and to ensuring that every child has access to quality education, removing barriers, and that they're able to achieve their potential, regardless of what they need to overcome to get there. So I'm glad that you're here and that we have your support in your ongoing advocacy.
All right. Thank
Yeah.
you.
I do hope you can stay for the presentation to the board on the slide deck, because I know our assistant director is sitting behind you smiling and grinning and nodding, because she's going to be doing that presentation and will be able to elaborate much more on the slide deck as well. It is truly about professional learning and how do we as educators all move forward together in meeting the needs of every single child and offering that quality teaching and learning. And there's no denying that that is ongoing work that we will be engaged in. It's been a priority of mine and something that we really embraced. In fact, today staff's probably looking a little bleary-eyed because we were very involved in the Powerful Learning Conference, which had several sessions just by their titles that were really integrating for all teachers. How do we need to best be meeting the needs of all the different students that are in our classrooms with different gifts
Thank
and
you.
needs.
And, many of these methods are appropriate in the general education classroom. And I did see that you
Absolutely.
mentioned that in your slides, So you close the holes in that sieve, and you don't have to have as many expenditures in, tier 2 learning, because you're able to teach those children together with their peers.
So our other focus after professional learning is our multi-tiered systems of support, which includes that response to intervention. And what's that tier 1 that we're really working on that's the best practices for all students before we have to scaffold up into the tier 2.
And I do hope that you consider the Slingerland or the Gillum method. That's, something that's an amazing tool for those kids that, where just the phonomic-based learning is not sufficient. It really does make a difference in terms of wiring things into the brain. So,
Familiar with both.
I know. Thank you.
If there's no If we have no other comments or other folks that would like to step down for our linkage session, I'm not seeing any. I'm going to go ahead and call for a recess. So let's take a 15-minute recess. We'll reconfigure the room. When we return at 7 o'clock, we'll begin with public input, which is the regular public input with 3-minute increments. And following that, we will get to the public hearing on the 2019-20 operating budget and 4-year projected budget. All right. Thank you.
electronic. Yeah, okay, well, good luck.
Thank you.
We're checking.
All righty. We are back in session. It is 7 o'clock. And so at this point, we're moving into Agenda Section 4A. This is public input. There are forms, if you're here for public input, that you can fill out. So far, I have one person. And if you'd like to come up to the microphone, the podium, I have a brief introduction that I need to read that puts some parameters about that. And then you're welcome to go. So this is a meeting of the board in public. It is not a public meeting that guarantees interaction between members of the public and members of the board. If you'd like to address the board on a particular issue, please limit your remarks to not more than 3 minutes, appoint a spokesperson if the concern is a group concern, and if desired, provide written documentation to the board's secretary. Public comments that name or otherwise identify a district student are not permitted without permission of that student's parent or legal guardian. The board may direct the superintendent to respond at a later date to the issues expressed. And with that, David Meyerson.
Hi, I'm David Meyerson, a former board member. I hope this is redundantly unnecessary because from what I heard when I came in, the problem has in fact been solved, but I thought I would read to you my prepared testimony nevertheless. And like I say, maybe you're going to miss me. You're going to miss me when I'm gone. Maybe not. One of the essential jobs of a school board member is to communicate with constituents. Unless there are confidentiality issues, I may talk about virtually anything with a constituent and have done so many times. For 8 years, if I received an email, either personally or as part of a group, my usual answer was that if the person wanted to discuss it more, I would be pleased to meet with them at Starbucks on Saturday. The only limitation is that if 3 board members are present at the discussion, we cannot discuss anything that could be construed as discussion that could lead to a direct action. In other words, we cannot talk about curriculum, but we can talk about which brownies are the best at Starbucks. With only 1 or 2 members present, we can talk about curriculum, and I've done so many times. I believe this view is consistent with the OPMA. There is no case law to suggest otherwise. If the board attempted to restrict my discussion with constituents, I would most certainly have ignored the restriction. After all, I am in charge of taking input from everyone in the community, from seniors to teachers to students to parents, in order that I may have diverse points of view when I make decisions about curriculum, MIEA negotiations, hiring superintendents, facilities, and bond issues. Like I say, maybe or maybe not you're going to miss me when I'm gone, but that's the end of my testimony.
Thank you very much for your time. Is there any other public input at this time? Okay, seeing none. We will move on to Section 4B. So this is interesting. This is the public hearing on the 2019-20 operating budget and 4-year projected budget. This is a public hearing, and so members of the public are welcome to step forward, ask questions, and get answers if possible. I officially open and close that for public input and public hearings. So with that, if everyone's ready to go, I officially open the public hearing on the 2019-20 operating budget and 4-year projected budget. It is 7:04. Would anybody like to step forward to discuss the budget, ask questions, or express concerns at this time.
Ty is ready to answer any questions the board may have. We have extra paper copies of both the documents that are online, the guide to the budget, as well as the very glamorous big budget book with lots of small print, if you would like to read through that. Noted for the board, there was some changes made to the guide based on board input from the first reading at our last meeting, particularly regarding fund balance.
At the last meeting, when we reviewed the guide and introduced the amounts of the 2019-2020 operating budget, one of the discussions about the new format of the guide and some of the new discussion that was placed in there was it was felt that the guide was lacking discussion of fund balance and what the district's priorities for fund balance is. So we added a short blurb about fund balance, that it's the financial reserves and is how we measure it, what the guideline is, what our minimum fund balance is moving forward. We've set it, the board has set the minimum fund balance as an 8% minimum, and that's gonna, as we're moving forward and adjusting expectations and assumptions, we will strive to work to having ensuring that we meet that minimum fund balance. So that's been updated as part of the guide, as part of our discussion of what are the budgets. It's within the section "What is a budget?" It discusses the nature of funds, what are the different funds that we operate with, what are the forms that are required by the state for budgeting, and now a brief discussion of fund balance. In terms of the budget itself, just very slight refinements in how things have been calculated. Again, thank you for your patience with the process. We had significant struggles with our Skyward operating system, financial operating system, as well as OSPI's website. Thank you for your patience. So in terms of the overall operating budget, we are projecting general fund revenues. The general fund is the general operations budget. Encompasses all of the learning salaries, the administration, the support functions, insurance, utilities, general operations. We are projecting revenues of $69.59 or $69.6 million, and we are projecting expenditures of $74.2. And as we talked about last week, assumptions that we've had for a very long time about what we include in the budget, we tend to budget the entire assumed obligation of certain contractual items within the budget, and the actual participation rate in those certain categories of activities for staff compensation and other items is actually incredibly low. So we wind up having significant overruns in budget. So what we're going to be looking at as we prepare our assumptions for the 2021 budget, we're going to be looking at moving towards an actual plus based model. We'll be taking a 3-year average of the actual use of it plus 2.5% to 5% wiggle room, and we'll be moving forward, and hopefully the larger excesses of unused budget capacity will be reduced, and we'll have a much tighter, predictable budget process in the future. In terms of the transportation vehicle fund, those dollars either come from levies or from state depreciation reimbursements. As our buses age, the state recognizes that we need additional funding to buy new ones, and so we get reimbursed for the depreciation cost. The current plan is next year is to buy 2 small buses for about $90,000. So.
I think it's also important to note that transportation is an encroachment, so to speak, on our, what we used to call our M&O levy. The dollars that we receive for transportation do not completely cover all of our transportation costs.
Even with the additional funding that we received from the state in terms of McCleary Boost, the state adjusted the transportation formula to recognize the fact that McCleary decisions raised salaries for all of the other staff members that are funded through apportionment. So the state modified the formula slightly. We got about another $500,000 in transportation support. We also received just under $500,000 in terms of a mid-year, you do such a good job, here's some extra money that we had laying around kind of grant. So kudos to Dave Bynum for being efficient and for helping us still maintain the program. However, even with these boosts, we are still encroaching. Transportation is it's an interesting program. Also, one thing to note is that with the general fund budget, we've also started a new assumption within the revenues of budgeting safety net. We've included the safety net reimbursements for special education within the budget. Previously, because of the highly variable nature of safety net, we didn't include it. However, as we're trying to be more transparent and open and have more actual based assumptions, we're including it within the assumptions. Additionally, also new revenues coming from the state based on the last round of legislative updates to the state funding formula. We are getting about another $600,000, $600,000 for special education. Part of the formula was tweaked ever so slightly, so we did receive that. In terms of the local levy, 2019 is the start of the new year, or the new era of levy funding. The state legislature changed the formula again in the 2019 legislative session. We are one of 5 districts that did not benefit from this change, so our funding will continue to stay as is. Capital projects.
Ty, just to remind the board that the school year that we've just concluded, the 18-19 year, was the year of the variable funding, where we had sort of one foot in each year when it came to our local levy collection. So 19-20 will be, as Ty said, the kind of new world for levies for us, where we will be at the new collection rate, which of course is significantly lower than what we were previously able to collect.
And that number was 16 million versus 11 million?
The last levy that we certified was just under 17 million. We will be certifying, we certified for 2019 11.2. So, significant reduction. As well as because of the crossover in between years, we were assuming a bit of a spike in terms of revenues. Again, as we're looking at the new formula, we can see that a little bit. Changing the offsets of transportation and safety net formulas helps alleviate some of the switch between the levy formulas, but we're still looking at close to $1 million less from 18-19 to 19-20.
Can I ask a question?
Oh,
about
absolutely.
safety net?
Sorry.
That's okay. So where is safety net in the budget? That I couldn't quite find that.
Safety net falls under
Special education.
special education. If you look in the big book, it's under GF4, general fund revenues. If you look in if you go to page 3 of 6, 6124, The 1.081 million, 600,000 of that is safety net reimbursements.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, I apologize. I'm sorry. I read left to right, just like everybody else, and so I tend to forget that the budget is at the very end, and that's the
The
actual.
1.4.
Yes, so the 1.4, 600 of that is. My apologies. Any additional questions about the general fund?
So we've got decreasing enrollment. It looks like about 120 students less predicted. So as we tighten up the granularity of our budget and, the slack in it, and we get more exact about our budget, the error in the enrollment actually has higher and higher weighting. Especially in a situation of decreasing enrollment, how do we protect against, not getting in enough revenue?
So one of the things that I'm going to be taking a look at is when we've projected enrollments previously, we've been taking a 5-year average and new students coming into the district, and as students move through, that's that change of year to year over the past 5 years. Starting this year, I'm going to be taking a look at a 2-year, a 3-year, and a 5-year average, so that we're starting to exclude. Is that me? Okay. We're going to start taking a look at how do we tighten up those projections. Part of the problem that we're facing is that kindergarten enrollment is so highly variable. Forever, as far back as I can see, enrollment is about 150 to 180% of the birth rate of incoming kindergartners on the island. Birth rate is usually pretty closely tied to incoming kindergarten enrollments. Because our actual enrollment is so much above the birth rate, it tends to skew the numbers a little bit. There's also, because of housing costs increasing, markets slowing down, the Seattle area housing market is actually starting to cool off significantly. And I believe I mentioned something about it in the guide, but there's an anticipation of slowing of new families moving into the area due to the cost of housing, as well as the inventory of housing not moving as fast. Also, there's other economic variables at play, but as we're looking at tightening up other assumptions, we will be looking at tightening up enrollment projections as well on how do we exclude statistical deviations, outliers, and creating more of a higher fidelity. But it's always going to be a gamble. One of the other things that we did this year is we took a look at what are the actual known students that are coming into the district as of July, and we revise our revenue projections to match that. So the students listed in the 4-year budget projection at the very end of the big book reflects, I want to say, August 8th, the students that we knew as of August 8th. And those are also the enrollment numbers that we use to generate all of the revenue projections throughout the main budget. And so we do take a look at how are we balancing as we move closer and closer to the actual adoption of the budget and make refinements to that. Unfortunately, when we start the time that we need to project enrollment and project staffing versus when we actually start staffing and hiring positions versus when we're compiling the budget and having new students enroll, it's a difficult balance between making sure that we're doing it in a timely manner, but also that we have sufficient time to get all the staffing in place before school starts, because we want to get people ready and lined up and not have to scramble in August to fill a kindergarten spot. So
Are we going to be explicit about the error bars, perhaps, on the enrollment, where we use a conservative enrollment measure for some calculations and kind of an excess enrollment measure for other calculations? Is that happen, or
We haven't, in the past, we haven't had to.
because our projections have been
Our
correct?
over the last 5 years, enrollment projections have had a correlation of 0.96, 0.94, as well as the outside demographic expert, Dr. Kendrick. He has a correlation of 0.97. So ours are very close when it comes to the actual truth, the actual factual enrollment that comes in. However, we are catching up to a phenomenon that other districts saw in the 18-19 school year of enrollment coming in below projections. I believe Issaquah for 18-19 was about 500 students below what they projected. So that's an entire building that they over. So while our margins are very slim, we are still pretty true to our budget projections. I mean, 120 students out of 4,000 it's
3%, 2%.
Yeah, 2%. So we are trying to, I'm going to be trying to tighten that up significantly, and we can definitely start producing error bars. And what does the 1 year, 3 year, and 5 year look like in terms of that? So, yeah, we can take a look at that. I believe we do an enrollment projection update in November, December. So when I come back to the board with projections for the 2021 school year, we can start taking a look at, I'll take a look back and see what the errors are and start throwing in some error bars.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any additional questions?
In a few places I saw, like, instead of numbers, it's X, 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 X. And I was wondering if you could explain, because I know when I do that on Excel, it means my column wasn't wide enough, or does it mean that it's just not relevant? I'm not sure.
Is it in the big?
Uh-huh.
Can you?
Yeah, in GF2, page 2 of 3, the second bolded, prior year corrections or restatements.
Yeah,
so
those
is that
are,
because you won't have those
yes,
until later?
Well, yeah, part of it is because we don't. So for 19, 20, and 18, we haven't actually had any corrections or restatements. A correction or restatement is when you've discovered during an audit a significant financial adjustment that needs to be made, or a material misstatement, or subsequent event following the close of the year. Like if we found out that we had a huge problem with error or omission, a liability issue, we'd have to go back and make an adjustment to the financial statements.
Right.
We haven't ever had to do that.
Okay.
So that because of that, the system spits out XXX.
So then the other one, just an example, is GF4, page 6 of 6, transfers local resources. Is that?
Additionally,
So we wouldn't have had them for 2017, 2018,
yeah,
and 2018, 2019, but, okay.
yeah. There's no activity. There's no budgets there for that.
So if we see an XXX, it just means it's like NA.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
null.
And
It's
then
void.
my other question is, for example, at the top of expenditures, GF8, page 1, we talk about basic education as opposed to special education, alternative learning experience.
Mhm.
But we also have basic education funded by the state, but then we go above and beyond. So I'm just wanting to make sure, are those two different basic educations, or how would you define this basic education?
So when we're looking at the expenditures, the title is expenditure by program. Part of the way that the state requires us to report expenditures is by program, which is essentially how we're delivering the education. Like what function of education is this serving? So program 01 is basic education. Program 21 is special education. Program 24 is federal special education. Program 97 is administrative support.
And those codes and definitions
Yeah,
are all
those-
provided by the state.
Those are all provided by the state. So when we're looking at basic education program expenditures, that's saying that that's encompassing essentially all of the classroom expenditures that are defined as basic education.
But for us, that could be high cap, it could be,
High cap,
or that, I know that has some other funding, but they use basic dollars as well.
yes.
But it would include the 7-period day, because that's salaries and
Yep.
everything.
Yep.
So, okay, I just want to make sure, because when I see basic education, I think something else now, and I'm
Yeah.
like, I think this is different.
So
okay.
there are two definitions of basic
Yeah.
education when it comes to education
Yeah.
funding.
So it's really our basic education plus beyond basic.
It's all the functions that we define as being classroom instruction, along with the support of principals and other things that fall under just the general day-to-day instruction of students.
Great.
That's basic education.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you very much, Ty, for this extremely complex and thick report. The enrollment trends, kind of potentially challenging, and we should recognize that, and maybe just recognize that as a system challenge to ourselves, that, you know, we are fortunate that we have a very high opt-in rate to our public school system, but there's still maybe 12%, I'm not sure exactly the percentage, of students that choose to go other routes for a lot of various reasons. But, you know, customer service, academic excellence, whole child, maybe that's a way we can, you know, think of that too, in terms of hopefully picking up some more students to want to come to our public education system.
Okay. All right. In terms of capital projects, within the guide, each of the funds is spelled out with a budget summary, very high-level summary, listing what the revenues are, what the expenditures are. For the general fund, there's enrollment projections and enrollment history, as well as program groupings. So when we talk about basic education, when we look at that's the summary. So basic education, that encompasses CTE programs. Trying to remember everything that's in here. CTE, 7-period day, counselors, libraries, principal offices, student safety, health, the nurses. So that's all of the supports and wrapped around basic education, as well as some of the other programs. Student basic education support, that's the central office, transportation, custodial services, special education, it's pretty self-explanatory. Food service is also one of our programs that encompasses the cost of our service with Chartwells, and then transportation and other grants and programs. High cap is considered another program that falls under here, but we get such little funding that we wind up using it for professional development and other avenues. Transportation vehicle fund, we're looking at purchasing 2 small buses, as I said. We should be receiving about $300,000 from the state for depreciation reimbursement. We're not in a levy for transportation vehicles right now. That'll come back up in 2022. Capital projects, assumptions that we're looking at for capital projects, finishing Mary Waite Pool. We've got some potential grant money that we're looking at to help us with the energy efficiency of Mary Waite Pool, which will help really give it some extra legs, as well as roofing projects at IMS and some of the other buildings, security upgrades, finishing the vestibule at the high school, and some other modernization efforts, as well as the long-range facility master plan. That falls under capital projects, and we have budgeted about $300,000 for that. The contract with Malum is part of the consent agenda, for this meeting. So once that's approved, we can start. I'll be on the phone with Brandy and Malem tomorrow, and we'll be kicking off. Debt service, it's really the repayment of the bonds. We set the annual debt service collection. I don't know if it's me or if it's... Yes. Well, it's in my... No. Sorry, keep going. We set the annual... The annual... Are we... Okay. We turned it off and on. The annual debt service to repay the bonds to build Northwood and IMS in the addition of the high school. ASB is always the fun one because we never know what's going to happen. These are loose estimates at best. So all the different activities that the students come up with in terms of fundraising and ASB card sales and some other things, as well as donations and fundraising activities are accounted for here, as well as the expenditures for athletics, clubs, and where the money collected for fundraisers for charitable projects goes, as well as a list of building summary budgets. We did talk about West Mercer's exceptionally large club revenue. That's for the Destination Imagination that supports all the buildings in the district. In terms of the long-range forecast, you will find that now at the end of the big book under the tab F195F. So the general fund, or the general budget form required by the state is the F195. We love our acronyms, numbers, and forms. So the F195 is the big budget. The state, in their infinite imagination, deemed the four-year budget to be titled F195F for 4. In terms of the 4-year outlook, we continued on with the established enrollment projection in the 3 outer years. Those will probably wind up being revised as we move forward. We might be a bit more conservative with those. In terms of staffing, because we're considering staffing and enrollment generally flat, we're keeping keeping employment, our staffing numbers flat as well. So as you look through, you'll see consistent numbers through there. The state, for the 4-year forecast, the state finally gave us some guidance in the form of 3 paragraphs for enrollment, revenues, and bargaining-related expenditures. Because our contract with the MIEA ends at the end of 1920, that means we only have 1 year of contract in the 4-year forecast. OSPI's guidance is that you take that 1 year and you roll it forward for the rest of the 4-year budget, which means for the rest of the 4 years, it's essentially the same as this year. It's the guidance we received. They don't. No. The OSPI's guidance was that because bargaining is so variable and unpredictable, trying to create some type of here's where we're going can cause a lot of problems, as well as inaccurate projections. I'm not saying that this is a completely accurate projection, but it's what OSPI has given us in terms of guidance and direction. Yes.
So do you literally roll that same amount, or do you take into account additional year of service and of
So
employment?
we do account for that.
Step-in column is
Step-in
accounted
column,
for.
and our step-in column is relatively small. We've also, as we roll those forward, we recognize that we made a commitment to the board in 1819 that for the foreseeable future, we would make reductions of $350,000 a year to try to keep the budget within bounds. That we're going to take a hard look at what we're doing and make it, are we being rational and reasonable about what we're choosing to spend dollars on? So the outer years in terms of expenditures are reduced by $350,000. In terms of enrollment, the state was very generous with their guidance, plus or minus 10% of enrollment. That's a bit more, that's more than we were comfortable with. So we were well within that conservative estimate, so we didn't touch that. And in terms of revenues, we do have some IPD growth in the revenues, and we're allowed to roll those forward based on projections. So when we're looking at the general fund, all right, so it's on page 4 of 14. The ending fund balance for 2019-2020 is projected to be $3.7 million. I do anticipate that to be a little bit higher just because of the extra stuff that we have in the budget that nobody touches. When we move through those years based on the changes in enrollment and revenue assumptions, the outer 3 years do vary a little bit in terms of ending fund balance, but the 4-year ending fund balance is about $4.5 million, which is a bit better than what we came with in 18-19. So, in terms of the other, any questions at this point?
When we talk about 8% fund balance, is that, what are we using as the denominator? Revenues or expenditures? Okay.
Expenditures. So it's, because it's, the assumptions right now, since we don't have a contract, they are a little wiggly. We will be working to make sure that we are moving towards that 8% compliance with the ending fund balance.
Clarification, we do have a contract through 2020.
We do have a contract through 2020. We don't have a contract in the outer 3 years. Thank you for the clarification. Any other questions?
So as the board's legislative rep, I just want to kind of confirm this. If our state legislator reps and the other ones had voted to treat us like they favorably treated Seattle, where they allowed Seattle to, instead of collect $2,500 per pupil, $3,000 per pupil, and only Seattle and I think one other school district. What? No, 3,000. That, I think, that difference that they preferentially chose to treat Seattle is costing us an opportunity cost of $2 million, as I calculated, $500. So I need to reach out to them, but I hope the community reaches out to them too and ask why did they choose to allow a different school district to tax themselves higher than any other school district? Why can't communities all be able to tax themselves at that same level? So it's about $2 million. That's what I'm seeing the difference?
500 times 4,000, that would be about $2 million.
$2 million.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Yep. Any additional questions? Okay.
We will need to close the public hearing, and then later on the agenda is a resolution for action from the board for the budget.
Well, at this time, from the members of the public that we have in the room, are there any questions? Anybody who would like to come forward to ask any questions or gain any clarification as a part of this public hearing? If you could restate your name for us and just for the record.
Well,
Sorry.
Dave Myerson, you mentioned that the unreserved fund balance goal was 8%. I've not been looking hard at what your actions have been over the last year, and I would just like some clarification as to that and how we're going to get there.
So as part of the discussion, under OE Operational Expectation 6 and Operational Expectation 7, which guide the financial administration, one of the expectations was that the district maintain fiscal reserves sufficient to meet the bond ratings or the requirements of bond rating agencies. When I attended the Washington Association of School Business Officers Conference in May, we had a representative from Moody's that was there and had a fantastic presentation on bond ratings. And so it was, which I brought back to the board in June, I believe, and started a discussion about what is the real expectation of bond rating agencies? Is it only fund balance? What does fund balance mean? What is the goal set for the district? What should we be working towards? And should we have a number instead of a rather roundabout perspective? I did some research and looked at 10 districts, the same 10 districts that we usually compare ourselves with. 5 of those had set numbers of fund balance in their policy, ranging from anywhere from 3 to 7%. So one of the considerations that Superintendent Kolosky and myself had been talking about for the last 2 years is what should we be using as an assumption for the ending fund balance. We took a look at it. We assumed roughly what is 2 months of payroll expenditures. That comes out to be roughly about 10%. And that, when we brought that consideration to the board, 10% is kind of a large target and also can be hard to hit. So we are looking at setting a minimum fund balance, which is still kind of where we would like to be in terms of close to 2 months of payroll, but closer in line with what other districts in the region have in terms of written policy. How we're going to get there, we're going to look at everything that we're doing, what we're putting in the budget that we're not using, that we don't need to have in the budget, and how do we increase efficiencies. This year for 18-19, we took a hard look at class size. We took a look at positions that we didn't need to backfill as people retired and resigned. We took a look at restructuring administration. Within the administration building, we lost our director of finance as part of a resignation, retirement restructure, and as well as looking at class size. With enrollment numbers coming down slightly, we've reduced the number of staff that we had in the buildings ever so slightly, just based on class size numbers. We're still within the K3 17-1 class size requirement by the state, and we've right-sized some of the classes at the other buildings to be more in line with what we're seeing across other districts. So we're taking a look at staffing and enrollment. We're taking a look at what we're choosing to spend our money on in terms of supplies and contracts, and how are we setting the budget, and what are we actually including in the budget in terms of capacity.
Add that we put it in OE7 and approved that at our last meeting to maintain average annual budget reserves of at least 8% with a target of 10% that are adequate to meet the financial requirements.
Thank you. A target used to be in the policies that we had, and I regret being part of the board that took it out.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments at this time? No? Okay, then it is 7:44, and so I will close our public hearing on the 2019-20 operating budget and four-year projected budget. And again, we will return to that specifically in Agenda Section 5A. But for now, we are going to move to 4C, which is the Superintendent Report.
So with us tonight to discuss for the board and provide information on the dyslexia program. As you are aware, there was legislation passed. There it is up there, E2SSB 6162. Nova Williams, our Assistant Director in Learning Services, is absolutely our resident expert on these strategies, and she is here to walk you through the slide deck and hopefully answer any questions you may have on the work that we've been doing. It's exciting work. I've gotten to observe some of the trainings as our gen ed and our special ed teachers have been participating originally. We started as an option and offered in the summer, and now we've, under Fred and Nova's leadership, developed more mandatory training for particularly our K through 2 teachers. Nova, take it away.
Just a couple opening comments that just kind of reflecting over the past 6 years. This is Nova's and my 6th year working side by side in learning services. When I joined, I was the director of learning services, and Nova was kind of still working on an internship, and she was a coach / TOSA, and then we were able to hire her as an administrator. Nova came in as former high school and middle school teacher, teaching English language arts, and had an incredible curiosity about how students come to learn to read as they go. And so as I see her tonight, and I know she was actually out presenting some of this material to another district today, as a matter of fact, she's become quite an expert on the early foundational skills for teaching students how to read, write, speak, listen, and develop those literacy skills. So we talked a couple months ago, Superintendent Kolosky and I did, and felt that we needed a presentation at some point to bring you up to speed on what we've been accomplishing as a district, both in some ways in the history, but really looking forward. Not just in response to the bill, but in response to the work that we really began that Dr. Lean actually had talked and referenced as well. So with that, Nova, I'll turn it over to you, but I do want to thank you for all of your work in our school district, both with our students, but most importantly with our staff who are impacting those students.
Great, thanks. So I'm glad to have a microphone because I'm losing my voice. Turns out when your baby goes to daycare, you catch all of the germs that she catches, so that's fantastic. I'm getting a great exposure to lots of germs, so I'll have a fantastic immune system, I speculate, in the next couple years. But probably not until then. So as you may or may not know, the dyslexia legislation passed. It was March 2018. Our then director, Lindsay Majatich, and I had been following it for quite a while as we were kind of going through, and had been talking about it before she left as to what we were going to do. At that time, after the legislation passed, they sent out a notice to all the districts saying, we're going to have a state advisory council. We're inviting people to apply to be a part of that state advisory council. And I asked Fred if I could do that because I thought that was really important that we have somebody in that role so that we could have some input in what's happening, especially since it didn't come with any funding. So we wanted to make sure whatever came out, we would be able to provide some input. So I'm going to run through the law a little bit in terms of what's in there, and then we'll go into what we're doing about it. So we're doing some really great things, and I'm very excited. I think it's probably one of the most exciting things. Interestingly, Donna, when she came here to do her visit, as she was applying to be superintendent at Mercer Island Schools, she popped in while we were doing a letters training in the library at Northwood Elementary. So what is dyslexia? This is the definition that's written into the legislation. I highlighted some points here, but this is the basic definition we see in lots of places. So this is the definition or a similar version of it from the IDA, the International Dyslexia Association. And we know that that it's neurological, right? So this is something that we can't just necessarily say, we'll do a couple things and we'll make it better, but we do have to be pretty persistent about it. Students have ranges of dyslexia, and so that said, we can manage a lot of intervention within the general ed classroom, and that's sort of a misunderstanding that people have about it, is that it has to be a special ed situation, but we can do a lot of intervention in the classrooms that will support it. Now, there may be times, and there are times, when students need specially designed instruction. And so those students will have to go off into and follow the process to go through to get specially designed instruction through special education. All right, so what does the law say? The law basically says that by school year 2021, 2021 and 22, we're going to have to do a few different things. The first of which is that we're going to have to screen all K2 students for, the quote is, indications of or areas of weakness associated with dyslexia. They're very careful in the law not to say that we're diagnosing students with dyslexia, because we aren't doing that. But as we have done in the past and will continue to do, we are assessing for weaknesses that are associated with that. Now, the tie is that we're really honing in on whether or not they may have dyslexia. So that's kind of the vein of the law. The 4 areas that the law really specifies are phonological awareness, phonemic awareness, rapid naming skills, and letter sound fluency. They don't get into the weeds about what all of that is, but basically what we do know is that in order for students to be able to spell, they have to be able to have those phonological awareness and phonemic awareness. They have to know the sounds before they can start learning to write those sounds. So we have to train them, and we have to train their teachers so that their teachers know what to do to be able to support them. The second part of it is that families have to be notified of their child's area of weakness and continually updated. That's obvious that we would want families to continue to be updated on the progress of their child. This is specific to their weaknesses associated with dyslexia. The third says school districts must provide interventions using evidence-based multi-tiered systems of support consistent with the recommendations of the Dyslexia Advisory Council. This last year, the council's role was to determine what are some recommended screeners. Recommended is a very specific word because they are not telling you what screeners you have to use, they're just recommending some. So they're giving districts options. We already have screeners in place, which we'll talk about momentarily, as to what we're going to use, but they've come up with a list as well so that districts could access that list. The second role going into this year is to really start building on some of that. What are the things that are going to be best practice? What are the recommendations for intervention for students? And that's where the work's going this year. That says that it needs to be evidence-based multisensory structured literacy by a trained professional, our teachers. In some cases, it could be paraprofessionals if they've been trained. Whenever possible, it should be the general education classroom. We know that in order for students to progress, we need them to be getting services in all areas, so that starts in general education. Now, if they are also in special education, they should be receiving services in both of those areas, general education and special education. Single service is not going to close that gap for them. If unsuccessful, intervention continues in general education setting and learning support, so that's kind of our first layer as we dig into interventions. And if it persists, then families have to be notified, and this is in law, families have to be notified that their child may need an evaluation for a specific learning disability or dyslexia. Reporting by district of numbers and students and interventions. So that's going to be the last bit is annually we report lots of things to the state. We report K4 literacy, so that tells them who's reading below, or how many students are reading below grade level at those grade levels. And they've said that that'll be a similar kind of reporting style. We'll report numbers of kids and how many kids have been flagged for dyslexia and what we're intervening for.
Can we ask questions at the slide that's relevant?
Sure.
I'm curious, do 504 plans come into play here?
Well, 504 plans or IEPs would come into play. The idea is that we would want to try first to intervene in the general education classroom because that's our first setting. And then what we would hope our teachers are doing and what we're training them to do is track data on what's happening with those students, because they should be trying interventions and tracking the interventions and whether or not they're successful. If they're unsuccessful, then that's when they kind of go off to their building support teams and figure out what's going on. And what happens in the evaluation process is what determines what direction we go. All right, so what about this all? All right, so what I like to say is I think this law is actually really great. I think it's great for kids. The intention of it is really great. What's really unfortunate is that the state provided no funding with it. And we're really lucky to be in a district that provides us funding for these things. So, you know, I was really lucky to chat with Fred and Donna and figure out some funding for this because it's really important for us. And we're starting early, so that's going to be great. So it aligns with our values and our focus priorities here. So that work that you've all been doing in rewriting some of that it aligns perfectly. Where we're talking about the whole child, we're talking about educating these children. We're talking about making sure that we're giving them those inclusive supports that they need. The graphic that you see up here is it's called The Simple View of Reading out of Goff and Tumner's research. And basically why I put this up here is to just show that if we don't have word recognition, then we don't have reading comprehension. That multiplication symbol in the middle there is to suggest that we need that in order to get to the end result of reading comprehension. If we don't have it, it equates to a 0, which means we don't comprehend the text. All right, so now what do we do? You know, in thinking about MTSS, the work that we need to really be doing is assessing, identifying students, intervening for students, and monitoring students. And I would say that our teachers have been working toward that. After the different learner committee, we had our Ames Web rollout, which I'll talk about here in a second. And so they've been doing a lot of that identification and monitoring piece, but now it's taken a whole new lens. And so we need to dig in a little deeper to that. The other graphic on this slide is another theoretical model that talks about reading, and it just reinforces the idea that reading has many facets, and those blue sections down at the bottom are our foundational skills. If we don't have foundational skills, we'll never get to those upper regions, and they won't really matter because we won't be fluent readers to begin with. So I like this model just because it shows that, you know, as a rope, if there's ever a part of the rope that's frayed or a part of the rope that is not solid, the rope isn't strong, and that's what happens with our readers. So especially with our dyslexic learners, we see these skill sets having weaknesses down here in the bottom of that rope, and they're never going to have that strength, and it just breaks apart as they get older. So the older they get, they might have great compensatory strategies when they're younger, but as they get older, those fade away because the text gets a lot harder for them. All right, so our rollout, what we're kind of looking at in terms of our 3-year rollout here. Last year, I served on that Dyslexia Advisory Council, and toward the tail end of the year, I was out on maternity leave. They selected the screeners that we'd been looking at over the course of the year and made some decisions. That is now public on OSPI's site, so you can see those if you like. The initial assessment work, so we kind of did a pilot of some things. We'll talk about that, and then we did a lot of planning for the rollout over the next couple of years. In 1920, I'll continue to participate on that council at the state level. Again, I think it's really important that as a district we have a say in what's happening and what's being submitted out there in the public as best as we can anyway, and to offer the perspective of districts. The other part is we're going to be doing LETTERS training, and I'll talk about LETTERS training here momentarily, but LETTERS stands for Language Essentials for Teachers of Reading and Spelling, and that's a professional development program that offers teachers some resources as to how they can help students access their foundational skills, really dig into those foundational skills and hone them. And then we're doing some assessment training as well. So we're splitting that up. Our LETTERS training will be for our kindergarten teachers, resource room teachers, ELL teachers, LSP teachers, and our coaches. And then the assessment training is going to happen 1st through 5th grade. And then the following year, we're going to reverse that. So you can see that in 2021. So then by 2021, the start of 2021, so far away, school year, will be in a good place. All of our teachers will have been trained in the assessment bits and the professional learning around early literacy. So they will be able to implement some of this and should have already been implementing it over the last couple years. And that way we can just hone those skills and make sure that our teachers are strong in those areas. So in thinking about assessment, back in 2013 is when we adopted Ames Web. Ames Web came out of the Different Learners Review as a recommendation. And so we adopted Ames Web as our benchmark screener. We've been using Ames Web for years now. In the school years 2014 to 2017, we continued that, and we built in assessment matrices based on our current curriculum. So about 5 years ago, we adopted our current reading curriculum. That current reading curriculum is comprehensive, and so we had to create some matrices that tell teachers what are the assessments that we're using and what are they for, how often should you give them, those sorts of things. So we built those with the curriculum. In 2018-19, we converted from Ames Web to Ames Web Plus. Ames Web, Pearson has said that they're going to get rid of Ames Web for a while now, and they're actually doing it, so we wanted to get ahead of that so that we have the support that we needed from Pearson, which is sometimes challenging. So we converted last year, and we did it so that our teachers, they didn't have to take on the burden right away. And so what we did is we had our LSP teachers, who were our SWAT teachers. They go out and they do the assessments. So we had them convert over to Ames Web Plus and utilize Ames Web Plus. So last year was a learning year because they changed some of the assessments. We spent a lot of time talking in our PLC about what the assessments were, how were they different, and were they the right assessments that we continued to need. So we talked about that, and then at the end of this last school year in June, we updated the matrices to match that. And so that was, we used it on a smaller scale. Everybody still was screened in the same way we've screened before, but there were fewer teachers using it. There were still teachers using it for progress monitoring. Every teacher was trained either by me or by one of their LSP teachers in their buildings as to how to do that. The school year of 2019 and 2020, what we're doing this year, Ames Web Plus is going to be used by K-5 classroom teachers and specialists. So our 1st through 5th grade teachers will use Ames Web Plus to administer their own assessments in the classroom. And then our kindergarten teachers, the LSP teachers, will help support them in giving those assessments as well. And LSP teachers and I are working on creating sort of a Tier 1 and Tier 2 version of assessments. What we know is that the screening is great. It gives us great data for teachers. And then teachers can use some of their curricular assessments as well to dig in a little deeper. So they could use things like David Kilpatrick's PAST, right, the Phonemic Awareness Screening Test. They could use other assessments in Ames Web Plus. But then we kind of get into a place where we need to dig even deeper and figure out what's going on. And so those are our kids who tend to have indicators or symptoms of dyslexia. Our Tier 2 assessments, our LSP teachers will come in and help support and kind of drill down to what are the weaknesses in phonology there that they need to help support. And they'll be able to help support and coach, along with our coaches, what teachers can be doing, as well as the professional learning we'll be doing. A couple of years ago, we utilized really great reading program for our LSP teachers, and they're all using that consistently. So we have a consistent programming for our LSP program as well.
One quick question. Are all students screened?
Yes. All K-5 students, and then our 6th grade students are screened using a little different
And are
tool.
they screened at each grade level, or?
Yep, 3 times a year they're screened. And the assessments vary depending on the time of year and what the purpose is of that assessment. But yeah, they're all screened 3 times a year. So now what? The professional learning aspect of all of this. The language essentials for teachers of reading and spelling. Fred mentioned when I started in this work, that became kind of a drive for me. And so I really dug into the letters work. The letters work is supported by the research that we know, and I know was spoken about earlier. That research is not new. It's about 30 years old now, and it is consistent. It's static. We know that stuff is all accurate. We don't need to keep digging into that. What we need to be doing is the work that it suggests we should be doing. So this program is not a program of how we teach things. It is the strategies by which we teach things. So it's not a curriculum. It's professional development for our teachers. It talks, the whole first unit is about the brain research around reading and what happens in the brain. It also covers what happens with the dyslexic brain when a dyslexic student is attempting to learn to read. And having teachers understand those neural pathways will help them then also understand what can build new neural pathways to help them understand and learn to read. So the way we're going to do this is we have 5 release days for our kindergarten teachers and our specialists, and they're going to cover all the units in the first volume of letters. The first volume of letters is our foundational skills. There's a second volume, which is vocabulary, fluency, comprehension, but this piece is really what ties us into those foundational skills that teachers need. The units are listed up here. The challenge of learning to read, I said Unit 1 is really about the brain research. That's what that whole thing is about. The second one is speech sounds of English. It's all phonology. And then teaching beginning phonics, word recognition, and spelling. We start tying those graphemes to the phonemes, so we're making one-to-one correspondence. And then advanced decoding, word study, and spelling is the final one. So the other piece of what we're going to do is we're giving teachers a toolkit. Our teachers, thanks to the Schools Foundation, in the past, when we adopted our curriculum, they all have tile boards already. So our tile boards are a way for them to manipulate the phonemes by just using the color tiles. And then later on, when we get graphemes or letters associated with those phonemes, they can start spelling those things. And it's kind of a simple beginning way to do it before we teach them how to actually write those things down. So they already have some of these, and the teachers who don't have these, like our specialists, will get some of these in their kits. Though simple, they're also going to get little felt pieces. Felt pieces are great for like onset rhyme and teaching kids things like that. Onset rhyme is important because it's a part of the way a word is built. And so again, we're attending to the sounds and the way words sound and what parts there are in the sounds. Those are all very important in order for us to get to the place where we have one-to-one correspondence, meaning we can start attributing graphemes or letters to those sounds. The other pieces of what they're going to get, they don't have these as simple as it seems. These magnetic wands and magnetic chips, they use to just tap out phonemes in things with small groups. So they would do these in their small group instruction. Our curriculum that we adopted several years ago has a great phonics program, but it doesn't include those kind of resources. So we want to make sure our teachers have that. Another thing that we're including is something we actually bought at the beginning of last year for some of our teachers who attended an optional letters training. We purchased with some of our Title I funds a program called KidLips. And KidLips is basically a program that provides images of kids saying that sound. And that really helps kids figure out the manner and articulation in which they're saying that sound, which again, all builds those neural pathways later on. It happens more automatically for typically developing kids, but this kind of thing helps our English learners, helps our dyslexic students, our struggling readers, and any reader who is struggling with that. It also gives them some content in here as well as a little script as to how they can reintroduce that sound if students are struggling with that sound and how to look at their mouth. They'd use little mirrors and things like that. The other pieces that came with it that we're giving them is phoneme, grapheme, and instructional cards. These are basically spelling patterns. The English language is predictable if you know the rules. So we know that there are lots of rules around how we spell, but we don't, well, I grew up in whole language where no one taught me any of that. Would have been nice for someone to have taught me that. Because if I'd learned all of those rules, I would have been a better speller when I was a kid. Thankfully, I was one of the kids who was able to just develop it because I read a lot. But those kids who are struggling with reading, they don't read a lot because they don't enjoy it at all. So they're not going to develop these unless we teach them to them. And so teaching to them gives them the power of being able to understand it better. So these kind of things we'll give them, and some of our teachers already have them, and they're using them on their walls in their classroom, which is really cool to see. So I have some pictures of teachers who have already put these on their walls with words that they've taught throughout the year, alongside their Mondo Phonics program that they're utilizing as well. And that's it. That's all I have. We have 3 trained facilitators for letters, which is myself, Amy Batliner-Gillette, who's principal at Northwood Elementary. We're both trained in the new edition of letters, which is this one. And then Amanda Higgins, one of our former coaches, she's trained in 2nd edition, so we're actually pulling her in to kind of be our expert in Mondo as we execute the trainings in letters. Yeah.
Thank you very much. This really is huge. Most appreciated what you and the team are doing here. I think we heard some of these concerns from parents in many different ways, but I think you've put together a super understandable, rational presentation and curriculum around this, or teacher training rather, and tools. This is wonderful. So thank you very much for your work on this.
I just have a thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I would imagine teachers are pretty busy. A lot of challenges.
Yeah.
What's been your experience or other people's experience learning this letters in terms of, because every new thing has kind of got a learning curve to teach, as well as kind of getting their attention, and there's always kind of a trade-off in terms of things.
What I'll say is I've never sat in a room where people didn't like it, so I'll start by saying that. And it's really great stuff. What I think they really appreciate about it is it could be implemented with whatever you have in your classrooms. So even teachers who don't have curriculum in place in other places aren't as lucky as us. they can use some of the strategies that are in here without it very simply. We're lucky enough to have a really comprehensive program that is also tied to the research base that all of this is tied to. So the nice thing about that is these align really well. The strategies in here align really well with that work that they're already doing, and all they have to do is just slide the new activities, the multisensory activities into that kind of work. And they're already doing that with their tile boards. We've had really good turnout with our optional trainings. It's just that in those situations, you're training the willing, right? And the law no longer allows us to just train the willing, so we need to make sure that we're training everybody for the better of our kids, so that all of our kids have access to the great instruction.
I think the biggest hurdle is time. People hear 5 days. Does it really take 5 days? And then once they get through the 5 days, they understand, why it really is as in-depth as it is. But it allows us to also not just think about our teachers, but our paraprofessionals as well, who have attended some of the optional trainings in the past. So they're gaining some of these skill sets because they're working with our students and intervening as well. We're going to be making a huge investment. We're pulling our kindergarten teachers away from their kids for 5 days intentionally this year. There was a lot of thought that went into this to say, is this trade-off really what we want? And we believe that it's the right thing and that it will pay off in exponential ways for students down the road.
I think it's also important to note that as part of our multi-tiered systems of support, that yes, we're training our kindergarten teacher, but we're also training all of our special education teachers who are working with our students. So there are those connections, and that's what's creating that inclusive and equitable. And as we move, as students might need to move through our tiers of support, that common language and those common threads are there so that there's creating that consistency for our students. And just to Nova, when you said whole language, I dropped my head because as I said at the beginning of the meeting, I've been doing this a really long time. And as a former kindergarten, first grade teacher, I would have been absolutely thrilled to have had my hands on those tools. Certainly had the same structures in place, being trained much differently as a teacher than many of our teachers are now, and we've created them ourselves, so what a gift.
Just a thank you.
Thank you so much for that very thorough and in-depth presentation, and I hope that folks in our community will take the time to review that and reach out with any additional questions that they might have. Yeah.
Great.
What a fantastic resource for our students and for our educators. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
We do have one more part to our superintendent report, and it will be, I promise, very brief because we don't have a lot to update you on, but we do have a provision within our policies that says the board will receive a semi-annual bargaining report. So Erin is going to briefly update you on bargaining, which there isn't much to report on at this time because we haven't been bargaining.
As Superintendent Kolaski noted, we are not bargaining at this time. We are entering bargaining season, so we continue to watch the settlements and the contracts that are being entered into around the region, because we know that one of our obligations under board policy is to be competitive in terms of salary and compensation for our staff. So in terms of a bargaining update, we don't have a lot. We're tinkering a little bit with the contract, consistent with the limited opener for the custodians, but that's a very small opener. But we are looking forward and starting to gather our data and doing our homework for the upcoming bargaining season, which will start probably early next year, so February, March of 2020. We will be coming to you with a bargaining team and the names of those people consistent with policy once those are selected. Do you have any questions?
Okay. Doesn't look like it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anything else for the superintendent's reports? No. Okay. So that concludes section 4 of our agenda. So is there a need for a break or a pause? Yes, I see that. 2 minutes, let's take a 5-minute break, and then we'll reconvene at, let's make it 8:20, okay? Thank you. Great, so we're trucking right along. Coming back into session at 8:19. We're moving into section 5 of the agenda. This is 5A, Board Policy 1800 OE6, Budget Financial Planning, Resolution number 678. And ahead of the board is a proposed action to adopt Resolution 678 and approving the 2019-20 operating budget. Are there any additional questions or?
I move we approve resolution number 678.
Second.
Motion on the floor is to approve or adopt resolution number 678, approving the 2019-20 operating budget. Any discussion? Seeing none at this time, all in favor of adopting resolution number 678 indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay.
He held his breath. Thank you, Ty. We have lots of confidence in you.
Are there any
Appreciate all
abstentions?
your hard work.
Sorry.
Holding our breath.
He held his breath even as we voted.
Are there any abstentions?
Sorry.
No, that's fine. Seeing none, then the board has officially adopted resolution number 678 approving the 2019-20 operating budget. Congratulations. Moving on to section 5B, Board Policy 2410, High School Graduation Requirements.
So as noted on the agenda, as the board knows, over the past couple of years, there's been a lot of changes that have occurred in high school graduation requirements. And as we've been working through this as a district and working through how best to meet the needs of our students, staff has proposed, as you can see on the agenda, revising our board policy and pulling it out into two separate pieces, one that's policy and one that is procedure. Fred is also available here to help with any questions or concerns that you may have. We would like to suggest taking action on this item tonight in light of school starting, so that we could work with staff in moving forward immediately to support students. However, we understand that this is the first time the board is seeing this on an agenda, so if you have questions and concerns that we need to bring it forward a second time, we are certainly amenable to doing that. So, Fred, anything to add?
No, I think in last Friday's board report, Superintendent Kolaski had provided you the first overview, so there weren't any surprises, and then some of that wording was then used to construct the board brief for you this week. I foresee continued changes to the graduation requirements as the legislature receives feedback about what they've accomplished or what they haven't accomplished. As you can see, I believe in part of it, they in the last legislative session, they just kicked a lot of the special education changes down the road to some work groups, which will come back to the legislature or come back to OSPI with continued changes. So the proposal is, one, we want to make sure we have a policy at the board level holding the school district accountable to ensuring that we're following the state laws. That is something that you do every year through what they call I-Grant 600, which is ensuring minimum basic education requirements, which is also part of tonight's agenda. And so there's quite a bit of scrutiny that we put ourselves through to make sure we're following the law. But the second piece is we would like to have the procedure so that we can remain nimble enough to make on-the-fly changes and make sure that none of our students are caught off guard because we have, just political policy level changes that we're working under. So this is really both to be accountable but also nimble at the same time. So with that, I can take questions.
I'm looking down the row for any questions, comments,
I was
concerns.
just going to comment that I appreciate staff working on this, trying to be nimble. and efficient and informative to our students and parents. It's difficult when graduation requirements seem to change every year, and to try to maintain that. And I noticed in one of the documents too, we also have to maintain a few years prior, because we may have some students who are taking a little extra time to finish their requirements to get their diploma, and so all that needs to be maintained and adjusted. And I really appreciate all the high school counselors who have to stay abreast of all of these changes and explain them to families. I see no reason to delay this. I think you've done a wonderful job in all the documents that I read, and it's not an easy task, but thank you very much.
You bet.
Oh, I just had one other thing to add. Although it's difficult that we have all these changes, it seems to me, and I hope it's perceived this way by public, that the legislature is trying to make continued improvements based on feedback, and it's not just willy-nilly changes or us going backwards. I really think they're listening and trying to make it fit the needs of all the students in our state.
Well said. I think I'd agree that it's okay for us to approve this evening.
Any other comments? All right, seeing none, the president would entertain a motion to approve the proposed revised board policy 2410.
So moved.
Second.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of approving the proposed revised board policy 2410, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? No? Okay. So the revision is approved. And then also on the agenda is the proposed procedural policy that is being currently put forward.
And which will be nimble.
Okay. So that concludes Section 5 of the agenda. So moving on to Section 6, Full Governance Process Monitoring and Language Review. Board Policy 1008, the Annual Agenda Planning, and this is a language review. Give a moment to look at that, and are there any recommendations for language changes?
I just see the need to change Board Policy 2020, which it looks like you have bolded for a reason.
Yes, for the exact probably reason that you were thinking of. Also on the consent agenda are the changes that will be made to the numbers, which then will allow staff to do a search of everywhere where Board 2020, which is on the consent agenda, to be retired, where it exists, and how do we replace it with now the correct number, whether it's referring, it might be two numbers, referring to also Board Policy 0001, as well as the operational expectation for the fundamentals.
Great. So I have no other changes.
Any further discussion? No? And everyone's all right with those numbers being updated and that? Yeah, I'm seeing consensus. All right. So then, with that done, we will move on to Section 7, the consent agenda.
I move we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? All in favor of approving the consent agenda as presented, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? No. Okay, then we will move on to superintendent announcements, Section 8.
Thank you for the actions on the consent agenda. We are excited. A couple of quick announcements. Left at each of your seats, the most recent WASDA Direct Quarterly Newsletter. I would like to point out page 7. I know you might not always look through this, but do look at page 7, where Student Board Reps on the Hill is the article, and you will see a picture of our 2 student reps on that page. And Meghana, who will be seated here next to me at our next meeting, is quoted on this article about the experience of students and legislatures meeting on the Day on the Hill. So kind of exciting to see our student reps mentioned there. Also, for the board, you probably should have received an email that the registration for the WASDA regional meeting on September 30th for our region is now available, and that is here in our community at Northwood. So if you would like to attend that, please let Kendall know, and she'll get everyone signed up for that. And just a quick reminder, I know I've been putting it on the update to you each week, but exciting times next week. Our new teachers will be in the house on Monday, and it is always great to get to meet them and see those excited, shining faces who are going to be in front of our children the following week. So hope that you'll be able to attend with me to meet our new teachers Monday morning, bright and early. And that's all.
Okay. Moving on to Section 9, Board Announcements, Inquiries, and Reports. Director D'Souza. Oh, I'm sorry. Legislative Representative Update. Let's start there. 9A.
So, Brian, you forwarded to me as well. I did receive it from the 2019 Legislative Assembly Proposal and Position Listing. In this, there's, I think, a total of 123 proposals and positions, some that are amended and clarified, some consolidated, some new positions, some returning proposals, and some standing proposals. I think in the past we have listed, I think, either the top 5 or the top 10 priorities. I forget which one it was. 5? Does anybody recall?
We did top 10 plus 5 alternates, in case any of our top 10 were knocked off.
Okay. So what I'd like to propose, and I'm open to a different way to do it, but is if we can send out this position listing to everybody, and then our next meeting, people come with maybe their top 15 indicated, and you share that with the board, and we just keep a tally, and we determine the top 15 from that. So that would be A, the process, and B, I think it would be nice to inquire to the administration to ask our superintendent perhaps what the administration's top 15 might be, and you'd be welcome to share that in an email to us. Likewise, it might be nice if MIEA would like to share their top 15. And likewise, ask the PTA to share their top 15. And they could send this to us before our next meeting. Just recognizing that when there's an opportunity to consolidate similar interests, I think we can we have a louder voice. So does that make sense? Would it be appropriate to ask? I could reach out to the PTA and say that the board would welcome their input if they were to send it as an email. Likewise, Donna, would you feel comfortable approaching MIEA and sharing that with them?
Certainly, we can direct them to the link since it's here publicly, and I'm sure each of those entities also have their organization's priorities. They might not have them established at this time, but they would, I'm sure they would reference those, and we can make every attempt to reach out to them. Whether or not they'll get back to us for the next meeting, we can only hope, but we can certainly ask.
But it's just nice to have the opportunity to hear these other organizations' priorities and keep that in mind when we're voting for the board. And then I think in October, the city is going to create their own priority list, and I think it would be nice if we had this top 15 or top 5 that we could share with them, and they could incorporate likewise. Does this seem, any input, any suggested changes, or do people like this, or not so much?
It sounds fine to me.
I like it. I think more voices in makes it more of a community voice as we send you to be our delegate. The one thing that on legislative committee there's been a lot of talk about is ensuring that everybody understands that there are kind of three components. There's the new or incoming legislative positions, which are up for consideration. There's the returning, which are in flux, which are totally up to be prioritized in that. And there are the standing SLPs, which also are part of that priority list. So all of those are up to be prioritized in that top 15. And then there's the permanent positions, which really address the why of the organization, and that is the delegate assembly that will happen in connection with conference in November, December. Yeah. So this is the new LPs, returning LPs, and standing LPs.
It is, if a board member is voting and creating a ranking, what would you like to share with respect to those three different categories in terms of how it might influence one's priorities? Does that make sense? I mean, it's if one's new versus standing versus...
So these categories, this is the actionable legislative work that happens. It used to be, and this is changing now, and I'm part of the subcommittee that's addressing the history of this. An SLP, after a legislative position had returned for 4 years consecutively, it kind of began to be automatically kicked to becoming an SLP, a standing legislative position, which was never the intent of that process. So the SLPs tend to be those enduring and still actionable legislative positions. So they're still very much valid. If there's an SLP that has moved to kind of a new thermocline where it's not actionable now, but still is central to why, then it moves off to that permanent position. Okay. But I think the legislative committee really wanted to make it clear to everyone and is trying to promote this that all of these are valuable, and new positions are like the ones we signed on to last year with comprehensive school safety and gun violence reduction, which is now returning this year. So those will be seen as returning with some other new positions that have the same language. We're still kind of having the same debate as last year. Okay. But yeah, all of them are equally valuable and all are actionable. And so really, what is important to you? What do you think is important to the district? And how do we get there out of 180 possible choices? Yeah.
Thank you. And let me ask another question to the board here. When do we meet? Is it 2 weeks from today?
3, I think.
Or 3? 3.
The 12th.
Would you feel more comfortable or comfortable is not necessarily the word. Would you like to show up with your top 15 slate, or do you want to show up with your prioritized top 15? Because it's going to sift out anyways. And prioritizing brings in new politics as well. So I open that up to the floor for people to contemplate. Just think about it. You're showing up 3 weeks from now. Do you want an itemized list 1 through 15 or just your top 15?
Thank you. I was going to ask that clarifying question. What is our task for next time? I have my list of 15 I brought tonight, but I didn't prioritize them because I think last time we didn't prioritize them because then we tried to blend, and if we had enough, like if one had 6 votes, or 5 of us, I guess, so 5 votes, then we were definitely going to have it on the list and that sort of thing. So prioritizing can take some time, and it might end up getting tossed out anyway because we really just have to see what floats to the top. And then if it has 5 votes and 5 votes and 5 votes, or 4 and 3 and 2, we're going to start to see which ones sort of rise to the top based on the number of votes they got from us. So I think it's probably best the ranking part is probably best left up to the legislative rep to take a look at, which ones were favorites of the most people to at least get kind of a, or maybe we might have actually tried to spend some time sort of ranking, but I think it's better not for us to spend time ranking ours until we get into the meeting, because it may just be a waste of our time to rank until after we talk.
Any other thoughts on that one? Nope. Okay, so now as a board member, I show up with my top 15, evenly weighted. Do people want to pontificate a little bit as they mention this in order to influence other people's top 15, of saying why they're doing it? Or are we just, for the sake of time, just list it because everybody's done their homework?
I'm not sure I understand your question, but what I was thinking, if I were to, since I've spent some time looking at my top 15, one thing I think was helpful to consider is that a lot of them are very similar. And so if you want to pick something about gun or gun violence, and I was looking at, I like the comprehensive school safety because it includes things about gun violence. And so finding one that's more broad to rank higher, I think can be helpful. And it also helps to spread it out because there's multiple 5 categories. Yeah, and so kind of spreading it out between the categories too, not having everything in funding necessarily, although that's tempting.
I seem to recall that we did do a discussion, and that I don't think it was particularly lengthy, but it gave people a chance to say why they felt something was important, when others maybe didn't think of that. And also, I mean, I think a lot of them rose to the top very easily, so there doesn't really need to be extended discussion.
So we'll keep comments as optional, and we might have additional opportunity for comments as we consolidate it down.
Can I tag a plug on? As you go to the wasda.org website, and anybody in our community can do this because it's all public. If you go under the legislative heading and drop down to the legislative representatives section, folks can sign on and register for the webinars, which talk about the process, how all of this came to be, how it's categorized. So whether you'd like a refresher course on all of that, or whether you're somebody in the community who wants to just understand the entire process, those webinars are pretty awesome. So I would encourage folks to check those out and register. You'll get an automatic notification in your email with a specific code to access the webinar. Yeah. Cool. So moving on to 9B, announcements, inquiries, and reports. Director D'Souza.
Yes, 2 things. Good luck to all the students going back to college or starting college this year. Good luck to all the students starting school, I guess, which will happen before our next board meeting. And third personal item, I'm taking my son to college next week. So excited for that. That's all I got. Thank you.
Yes, and I heard some teachers started meeting this week and for professional development or meetings, and just want to thank them for starting their school year already, and hope people are getting excited about the school year starting in just under 2 weeks. Yeah.
So in the agenda, there's a PDF that has a draft of a draft of a board letter, potentially to be submitted to the Mercer Island Reporter, about the long-range facilities plan that I believe we just agreed to in the consent agenda, correct? Mm-hmm. Okay. I don't know if we want to collect real-time input on the letter right now. I don't know if people have had a chance to read it. Or if you would just like to send either Brian or myself edits for 3 weeks from now.
I have a couple comments that I think would be better in the public setting in case people have opposing view.
Sure, recognizing this is
Right.
a draft and by
Yeah,
written by
yeah,
one
yeah.
person. Yeah.
Yeah, well, and just, I think overall the letter's great. I just had a couple things. So if we're ready to discuss a little bit.
I mean, one option is we could edit on a fly with the idea that this could be on the consent agenda for next meeting.
I actually could just give the comments and then you could decide. If we have consensus that they're worthy, then you guys can fold them in however you want. I don't think we need to do edits on the fly.
Yeah, I would just mention that much like the policy that kind of came forward last week, although this is a little bit more time-oriented, that this is kind of presented for information at a first glance. So depending on the consensus of the board and how you would like to move forward as a body in regard to this would be the direction. But more than anything, it's presented as information tonight.
Okay, so you want me to hold my comments?
What does the board think?
I think I kind of have a general comment. So, I mean, that could shape where it goes rather than editing. So, I think maybe very general comments would be good to talk about now to make sure we're all kind of
Keep
on
it
the same
short.
page.
And also, it's important that the public knows this was just a single draft written by one person. So I think it's important that, A, the public knows that, and if any board members disagrees with the format here, you have that opportunity to say now. Yeah.
So, do you want to go first? My just general, first of all, thank you. And the information that you put in is thorough. And I worry if our purpose is to basically do like a press release to the community to announce what we're doing, I'm concerned that it's too detailed. I would focus it more in a general, hey, we're doing this, we're going to be reaching out to the community, here's why we're doing it. Maybe some of this information should be in it, pointing out how old some of our schools are, but I would do more of a, come join us in this endeavor kind of email, like we're doing this, come join us, we want to hear your input. And then the one big concern I have is the statement, although the board does not foresee another bond in the near future, it would like to develop the LRFP, blah, blah, blah. Bottom of the second paragraph. I think we should make no promises. I mean, no timeline, nothing about where we're going to end up because we have no idea. So that's all. And that's kind of a general comment using that one as an example. But thank you so much. It's a great starting point.
I appreciate those comments. Mine are different, but I like that it links to the LRFP or the link. But we would need a smaller URL there if we were going to publish this. And then I think the history is really good because a lot of people come to this island at different times and with different understanding. And so I think that history is really helpful to understand why we're doing this. Although maybe it's obvious if you walk into one of the buildings, one of the older ones. I think if we're going to do this, my opinion is that we mention that what the cost of this is, or at least say the cost of this plan will come out of our capital projects budget, and we can name the line item and the amount, and not the general fund, and so that it's clear that this is in no way compromising our student programming. Because I think that's going to be the number one question or criticism is, why are you spending this money when we could be X, Y, or Z? So I'd like to anticipate that by mentioning and if we're going to be transparent, we should put the amount that it's going to cost and that we have budgeted for this. Otherwise, it looks great.
And unless I'm missing it, I don't think the pool's mentioned. I think we should, because that's a facility.
And I should also share that a significant amount of this language was borrowed from the RFQ in terms of the dates and the histories and stuff, so. Okay.
I think if we mention the price, I think that's a good idea to be transparent about that. I think that also means the history behind the buildings as well, and that these buildings are in need of renovation at some point. So I think the two go hand in hand.
Yeah, I would be cautious about indicating what the board thinks we may or may not be headed for. I think using caution there is good. So it's clear that we're not going to this with any specific expectation other than a community facilities review committee.
Community engagement.
Exactly. A community engagement process. I noted when we move this forward to the agenda that if it's a letter to the editor, it needs to be a little less wordy. You can cut it, I don't know, 100, 150 words. But it could also be presented as a press release, and if working with Craig and the superintendent, that could lead to a story which is much more robust, and then you have a journalist asking questions and helping, which might be helpful. And then, yeah, in the list of facilities and everything, I noticed the pool. And then also wondered, we talk about the administration building, but also there's the property that Peak sits upon, and there's Crest, and there's ball fields, and, I mean, yeah. So, but yeah. So, yeah, but thank you for a first go at this.
So, I think timing is important, especially if by chance there's applications to serve on the committee that happens before this announcement. And that would be too bad. I truly think public process, you do it often, frequent, and early. So how about we take another swing at this, and would it be okay to do kind of a special meeting? Because 3 weeks is a long time to wait, and this I think it'd be important for us to kind of control this information flow a little bit. It'd be advantageous.
What does the board feel about a special meeting between now and the next regular meeting? And staff.
Is it necessary? Well, if it's a press release, is that something we approve? No, not really, right? Unless we have it signed by the board. But if we do a press release, it's not really something we would need to.
It would depend on how the press release is presented. If it's presented on behalf of the entire board, then it should be something that the board has seen before we release that and send that out.
But it would be an action item that we need to have a meeting for?
When we've had letters before that have come from the board as board letters, we have had either a special meeting or the letter presented at a public meeting that all the board then had agreement and consensus.
Yeah, and I'd be in agreement to have a special meeting. It probably wouldn't take very long.
Another option might be to hand it over to Craig and do a press release from the district.
In any case, I think the timeliness is important, so we need to do it sooner rather than later.
Also thinking somehow as the process begins to iron out of how people will submit names or where to be looking to submit or how that process is going to happen for the committee would be a component of this, I think, letter to say, but we haven't really ironed out those pieces yet, and so, but that's an integral part of this as well.
I'm fine with meeting sooner. I'm going back and forth in terms of, Ralph put a lot of work into this, and I think has felt strongly that this should come, as a board announcement to the community. The benefit on the other side, though, is doing a press release, and then hopefully the reporter would reach out to do a full story that would talk about the process more, where we could talk about all these things. So that's why I'm kind of going back and forth. So I actually defer to Ralph, because you put all the work into what we have here.
I think you're giving me too much credit for the amount of work compared to what the board's already put into this. So thank you. I see the benefits of both.
I would just refer you back to the consent item, the option 1, that was what was on there. Doesn't have a first meeting until November. I know we're hitting September. There are several meetings, the first one being in August. I anticipate that Ty and or myself and Brandy will probably be in some kind of call with Malum, probably not tomorrow, but early next week, and can tease out details as well. But I wouldn't anticipate a whole lot going out beyond, yes, you've approved this prior to the next meeting. If you have a concern of something going out to seek community engagement, I can't foresee how that, when I look at the calendar over the next couple of weeks, how anything would go out prior to September 12th.
So our next regular meeting would be fine, you're saying?
I would think so, yes.
Just out of curiosity, are we going to do some kind of press release for the new values, vision, and mission too?
Oh, yes, we're working on that as well.
Okay, thank you.
And certainly, when thinking of press releases and rolling things out, we wouldn't want the two things to be right on top of each other, where you don't want one to step in front of the other. Final thoughts, action? Are we comfortable with moving this to the next regular meeting? Do you want a special meeting in between?
Sounds like next meeting will be fine.
Yeah. Good. Okay. And it sounds like maybe some revisions with feedback if appropriate, and then moving this into the next regular meeting.
Yeah, so I've got everybody's comments here. Do you want to work together on the revisions?
We can, if you'd like.
Great.
Happy to. Okay.
So you don't want more comments? Or
I think so, as long as we don't violate any quorum stuff. So I'm not sure who you, if you can, you send comments to me, and then I can work with Brian. What is that a little bit dicey?
By me adding, suddenly stepping into that, might convolute that. So maybe everybody can send, just pull me out of the equation. Everybody can send comments to you if you want, and you can rework that and return. Because then that information is going one direction. I don't know. We've done that before with Director Drinkwater.
Yeah.
So what's the concern, that there would be 3 people working on it? Because who worked on, it just was you before?
Yeah.
Then I think, yeah, you can work with Brian, and then anybody having edits can just send them as long as it's a one-way communication.
And it's edits on this existing draft. We're not going to go through an iterative process.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Right. So you won't hear back from either of us.
I move we adjourn.
We have 2 more reports.
Oh, okay, forget it then. I withdraw my motion.
But that was very aspirational of you. Okay. Vice President Lurie.
I clearly don't have anything to say. I actually forgot, so no worries. No, just a really super quick, just excited for the beginning of the school year, and I'm not sure all the students are excited yet, but I think they will be, with all the back to school fee and photo stuff happening next week for our secondary students, and then the Meet the Teachers the following week. I think it's the following week for, Yes, for elementary, which is a really exciting time. I just want to take a moment to thank all the members of the community that have reached out to us on any of the particular, anything that they've reached out on. It really, I think, enhances our discussions. It gives us different points of view, and I think it helps lead us to better resolutions when we do hear from the community. So it can be a little stressful sometimes getting all these letters asking us to do something that we might or might not be able to do, but it's very, at least I appreciate it very much, and thank you. So please continue to do so, and we look forward to future comments.
Okay, so for me, not too much. There is, and I don't have the number in the packet for new legislative positions. Mercer Island is named in one of them specifically. It has to do with equity and student funding. And I am the person from the legislative committee who's representing that new position. So if you have any questions on that, I think because that's a legislative committee issue and not a board issue, I think we might be able to discuss that, but defer to compliance on that. So we did have our first leadership meeting with the interim city manager, Jesse Baum. That was on August 15th, and as per our new policy language, I have a report on that. It'll be brief. We discussed the new values, vision, and mission in the district, as well as talked about the long-range facilities master plan. There was some interest in the city of working with that and how our interlocal agreements might work around that. And we discussed the 2019-20 budget adoption for the district. Coming up, as the city continues to look at their fiscal sustainability plans, there'll be some looking at the student resource officer interlocal agreement and the specific language there of how it came to be, and maybe some language revisions, so it would be good for everyone to familiarize themselves with that, as well as park maintenance interlocal agreements. As the city is looking at some different options for doing cost-benefit analysis, it's good for us just to have that in the back of our minds, that it may be a point of discussion at our upcoming linkage session with them. And that's October 24th will be our joint city and district meeting. We discussed the cougar a little bit, had some fun with that. So that was good. And we'll have one more meeting before that linkage session. And then also yesterday, I'm very happy to say that I sat in on the exit review from the auditor of the state of Washington concerning our 2017-18 financial audit. And the audit is clean, and we are looking good. And so a huge round of applause to Director Bergstrom and Superintendent Kolaski and the entire team of people that brought this together. It's not been an easy past couple of years navigating school finance, so the fact that it was a short meeting and it's a clean audit, everybody should have absolute confidence in the work being done. So I was very proud to be in that room and accept this report on behalf of the board. And I have the report with me if anyone would like to see that, or
We will have copies of the report for all of the board members.
Okay. Great. Then outside of that, you've got postcards talking about Legislative Assembly coming up from the committee, and we continue that work. That's all I have for my report. Thank you. Now I'll take a motion for adjournment.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
Is there any discussion? No. Seeing none, all in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? No. We are adjourned. Please stay around for a little bit to sign paperwork.